So let's talk about string-based algorithms. The first and most important thing to realize about strings is that in most programming languages, a string is simply a list of individual characters. So a string is essentially just like an array. It's just an array of individual characters. So let's dive into a classic algorithmic challenge, which is to reverse a string. I was actually asked this once on a coding interview. So the first thing we should always do when tackling an algorithm is to specify the inputs and the outputs. So our input is going to be, let's say, a string hello. So our output will be ole. But to hammer home that a string is extremely similar to an array and that it's just a list of characters, we're actually going to first solve this as if this were an array. So let's actually change our input to this. So here we truly are working with arrays of single characters. So the general strategy that we're going to employ here is to create a while loop that is going to start at the end of the array and work its way towards the beginning of the array. Before the loop, we're going to initialize an empty array, and as we use the loop to iterate backwards through the array, we're going to take each character that we encounter and push it onto the end of this new array that we're building. So let's go ahead and make a function called reverse that is going to accept an array. And we're going to start an index variable at the very end of the array, which would be array.length minus 1, since again the first index of an array is actually 0. We are then going to create our result, which is going to start out as an empty array. At the end of this function, we're going to return this result. We now need to build the while loop. So while index is greater or equal to 0. So this while loop will run all the way until it hits the beginning of the array. We're going to push to the end of our result array index, meaning whatever letter we're up to inside the array. And then we're going to decrement index by 1. So now to test it out, we're going to print to the screen reverse, and we're going to put in our input as the argument. And indeed, we get the reversed version of this array. Now here's the kicker. Let's say we go back to our string exercise. So now, instead of reversing an array of characters, we want to reverse a string of characters. This very same algorithm that we've built is the correct algorithm. All we need to do is just change this array to a string. And instead of the result being an array, it's going to be an empty string. And instead of using the push function to add something to the end of the string, which doesn't work in Ruby, we need to just say plus equals. And we can get rid of these parentheses. Let's check this out on the terminal. And this works. The reason that this works is that strings have an index just as arrays do. I could print out this. Hello, square bracket 0, and I will get the H. This really drives home the fact that arrays and strings are very much alike. So again, the trick here is that once you realize that a string is essentially just an array of individual characters, you can treat it practically the same as an array, and if you're good at solving array-based algorithms, you can use a lot of those same techniques to solve string-based algorithms. And now for a quick bonus tip. This algorithm that we used is having a while loop go from the end of a string to the beginning of a string, and putting each character at the end of a new string, the result that we're creating. However, I would like to encourage you to think out of the box as well, and realize that when adding new things to an array and a string, while many times you typically do add them to the end of the array or string, you can also add things to the beginning of an array or string. So we can actually have our while loop work from the beginning of the string to the end of the string, except that when we add each new character to the result, instead of adding it to the end of the result, we can add it to the beginning of result, as follows. So let's have the index start out at 0, like a classic approach, and we can say while index is less than string.length, and instead of adding the string index to the end of the result, we can say result equals string index plus result, so that we're adding the string index to the beginning of the result. And of course, we're going to have to increment index by 1. So if we try this out, we'll see that this works just as well.